Hello, everyone. Welcome to our recruitment seminar. Specifically, we are going to do a Train the Trainer seminar today to specifically help you train and prepare your chapter for the upcoming recruitment season. Specifically, this could be for an informal or a formal process, but we are going to walk you through the ins and outs of a specific workshop that can help prepare your chapter for the best success during recruitment. Perfect. My name is Dominic Green. I'm the Senior Director of Chapter Development from the Oregon chapter, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague.
Hey everyone, I'm Hayden Ron. I'm also from the Oregon chapter, currently serve as the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement at Oregon Health and Science University, former staff member, former VP of Recruitment, and really excited to help you all learn best ways to train your chapters in recruitment.
Perfect. So, like I said before, this program is really designed for VP recruitments, for members of the recruitment committees, advisors. A lot of this really can be a train the trainer program, and we will make these slides available to you. So if you'd like to be able to use these slides for a specific program back at your chapter, so we're going to walk you through all the slides today and the different activities, and have an opportunity to help to train you how to facilitate this for your specific chapter. So we will get started. So part of this, we start with this question. This is actually something that we did at the Oregon chapter. We would usually cancel our first chapter meeting of the year. I would actually have everyone would sit in a circle and specifically answer this two questions. We're going to start with the first question. The first question was, why did you join DU? And really, it's an opportunity to have people share the story of their recruitment journey, right? So who did you meet? What other fraternities did you look at? Why did you pick DU? Like, who's the one or two people that really convinced you, that hooked you in and said, you know what? And you're like, you know what? This is the chapter I want to join. For us, at times there were anywhere between 50 to 70 guys, but it was powerful to have from freshmen to seniors articulate why they joined, and really what were those reasons, and really got us pumped up and excited for recruitment.
Yeah, and I think, Dominic, what's really cool about talking about why you're joining DU, and we'll talk about this a little bit later in the webinar, is the fact that other members might learn something new, but also understand connection points during recruitment and understanding, oh, Dominic joined because he was looking for X, and there's a P&M who I'm talking to who's looking for a very similar thing. I know that's why Dominic joined. I'm going to make sure I connect those two. And so this is just a great opportunity to really understand the other guys in your chapter, and personally think about your story, especially if you're a sophomore, junior, senior. You might be a little bit more removed from that recruitment process. And so it's a good reminder of why I actually joined the chapter, joined the organization, and why others should join that as well.
And it's important to remember that you have everyone to take part in this activity, right? That's really a crucial part of this activity. But I often found it really funny. At one point, I think my junior year, we realized that one guy was responsible for almost 60-70% of us joining the chapter. He wasn't necessarily the reason that we joined, like we actually accepted our bid, but he was the hook, right? He got us an event. He talked to us at an event. We remembered him at an event. And that was really powerful to remember that this one individual had touched so many parts of our recruitment journey, which is actually pretty cool and pretty unique. And how many years later, I still remember having those conversations. So we want to be able to talk about yourself. A big part of recruitment is brotherhood building, knowing your brothers, knowing why we're here. So we just talked about why you joined. We also want to know more about you. And I think this is pretty apparent when you walk into recruitment, into a chapter, that often I was there as a P&M before. I've seen it as an advisor. I've seen it as a headquarters staff member. Is often sometimes chapters don't know enough about each other, right? They know the basics. They know like hometowns, majors. They might know what this guy's hobbies or interests are, but besides that, they don't really know much about this individual. So we're going to talk to you. What we want to do is set you up for a specific activity to be able to have each individual share their passions. We want them to talk about their passions. What do they care about the most? And have them pick 3 things that they're really passionate about, they're really hyped up about. I think, and Hayden can share an example, but I know for me, like I love talking about sports. I can talk about sports all day, every day. I'm also like, I grew up in Los Angeles, right? I love movies. I could talk about, what are the latest, greatest, awesome movies coming out, right? So the things that I could talk about for hours are some of the things that I'm really passionate about. But some people, people only knew that because my chapter at the time when I was in the chapter, we were very good about knowing what our passions were and going below the like standard basic like get to know you questions of which was where you're from, where do you go to high school, and whatnot. So, hey, kind of what were you? Do you have some examples of what this might look like for you? So when we're talking to chapters.
Yeah, I think specifically for my experience as an undergrad, and I think beyond in doing recruitment expansion work for the fraternity, I think what I found is what was really nice is that we were recruiting a lot of just different individuals, and we had a lot of different individuals within the chapter. And so I always say, when I was an undergrad, our chapter had the cheerleaders. We actually had cheerleaders, but then we also had the guys who were like top ranked in video games, right? And what that allowed for us to do in knowing that is if Dominic came and was like, hey, I'm really interested in X, we knew we had the ability to introduce them to a wide gamut of individuals. And to Dominic's point, it allowed for us to really know who the best person was to connect with that PNM. For example, we had guys who were coming from Central Oregon and the Bend area, and a lot of Bend guys know each other, but then there were also opportunities for Bend guys who didn't know each other or they played sports with one another. I also, in my process, learned that I met somebody when we were going through the process together that we were in the same basketball tournament as seniors in high school in Northern California and would have seen each other at the gym, but wouldn't have known that if we didn't talk about playing basketball and where he played basketball and talking about the locations we played basketball. And then when talking to PNMs, because we were both in the same new member class. Then when talking with PNMs, I knew where he went to high school. I knew where he played basketball games. So when talking from somebody from Marin Catholic, I could go to Matt and say, hey, Matt, remember when we played in the same tournament, didn't know each other at Marin Catholic? Like he actually went to Marin Catholic, and already that instant connection's there. But if we're not talking about our passions or talking really about who we are and our backgrounds and what we care about, then Matt and I would have never known that because we would have just known, hey, you're from Northern California, I'm from Southern California. It doesn't really match, but we both like DU and we're both cool dudes, and that's awesome. But there's more to that than what we know. And so having that conversation, which then led us to having deeper conversations with a PNM, is so important.
Absolutely. And for the setup for this activity, I have done it a couple different ways. You can give people, small sheets of paper. Sometimes I've also done it almost think like an art gallery where you give them like a flip chart paper or a half a flip chart paper, give them a marker, and they actually have to illustrate the three things they're passionate about, right? So this could be family, sports, your faith. It could be soccer. It could be video games, whatever that is. You tell people to get specific. Like you can say friends, that's great, but like what specifically do you like to do with your friends that you could talk about, you can talk about for hours, right? So I think Hayden and I both used some examples, but what we did was we had every person individually did this activity and had everyone share out. And often it's a great way to just learn new things about guys. And we're like, okay, I knew you kind of like that, but I had no idea that you love geeking out about Star Wars, right? And you're often gonna find someone who walks in and you're like, oh my god, I'm like, I love Star Wars too. But you're gonna know who the Star Wars guys are. You're gonna know who the soccer guys are. You're gonna know the guys. We had a few international students in our chapter at the time, so it was great to be able to connect them with other international students who are going through recruitment. But we knew so much about each other, and at times, like I said, we're as high as 70 guys in the chapter. We still knew enough about each other to be able to bounce off each other, to be able to connect them with individual people, right? Because you're going to talk to PNM and really get to know that person, but you also want them to meet. I'm like we have a lot in common, but you literally are Hayden, right? You played basketball, you're from Southern California, and all these other things. You want to be able to make sure that you're introducing them to the people that also share similar interests to them, because often people join for people, right? And we're going to talk about that a lot in recruitment, but that's really important that you all need to get to know each other a little bit deeper before you start talking about the recruitment process.
Yeah. And I think, Dominic, real quick, going back to that, if you are going through this activity and guys might be hung up on this, like, well, I don't know what my passions are, like they may kind of not really get it. Another way to frame this, and I love this question, is if I were to ask you to get up and give a 10 to 15-minute TED talk on any topic, what would you like? What could you easily talk about for 10 to 15 minutes right now? Again, it goes back to somebody might come up and be like, I could talk to 10 to 15 minutes on the order in which you should watch the Star Wars movies, right? And so that just is like a fun way to reframe this if your chapter is having a hard time or struggling with coming up with, well, what are my passions and what is it more than just friends? It really is about like, what do they want to talk about for 10, 15, 20 minutes is another great way to frame that for the guys.
Yeah, 1000%. Yeah, because you really do get some pretty cool deep dives once people get, like I said, allow people to get personal, allow people to really share specific things that they really, really care about that people in the room might not realize that you're really into, right? I was a huge music person growing up my entire life. I got to the chapter and I stopped doing music because I was just ready to kind of move on to do other things though. But people had no idea that I was a singer from third grade to senior year of high school until we actually did this activity when I was in the chapter. And they're like, what? And I was like, I could kill it in karaoke, but you guys would never know that. So it's still kind of a random, very specific thing, but it's a good opportunity to just get to know more about each other. So perfect. So what we're going to do, this is a great opportunity. We want to transition into getting to know more about what you love about Delta Upsilon. So what you're going to do is you're going to have everyone in your chapter or associate chapter break up into pairs, and you're going to have them talk to each other about their favorite thing about Delta Upsilon. So you're going to break them up into pairs and then have them talk to each other. You can have them rotate around as well. You could be groups of 3, but smaller groups of people, pair and share to really, what is your favorite thing about DU? And they don't have to think about it much. The first thing that comes to their mind. Hey, anything else on this of like, just to get them talking to each other about the fraternity?
No, I think the big thing, yeah, Dominic, I think really challenge them too. I think, yeah, first thing that comes to mind, but really challenge them to where it's not just saying brotherhood, like challenging and be like, okay, well, I know we'll talk a little bit more about this, but it's like, okay, is there something specific that you really like about the brotherhood there? So what we don't want to have happen is everyone's one-word answer is brotherhood. While that's great, it allows, I think it will help if there's a variety of favorite things about D, and you'll see here why in a little bit. So just encouraging them to really think through, like, what is that really favorite thing? A 1-word thing, 2 words, 1 sentence. And yeah, to Dominic's point, quick and pair and share. So have them pair up, have the guys be in 3s, and then allow for you all to share out as a group there, whether or not those guys are volunteering or you have to volunteer them to share out.
And little disclaimer for some of these activities, all of these activities, it's specifically adding up to getting your chapter prepared. Sometimes you need to say, take this seriously. I know that's sometimes a disclaimer I had to say when I was chapter president. Like, I know we joke around, we have a great sense of humor, but we need you to actually give a real reason what your favorite thing about the chapter is, right? And also sometimes you have to use the word specific. So take it seriously, be specific, but that's going to have a much more constructive conversation when we move on to the next few activities. From there, we're going to transition into, we want each individual. So this is where we want you to give them individual sheets of paper, pen, markers, whatever that looks like. We want people to individually articulate on a sheet of paper to themselves at first is the top 5 reasons to join your chapter. So we talked initially about your favorite thing about Delta Upsilon. Now we want to narrow it down a little bit further. It's possible that your favorite thing about DU is going to be on your top 5 reasons, right? You might have just talked about that with your partner or partners, but what's the favorite thing about your chapter? What are the best reasons why someone would join Delta Upsilon at XYZ school, right? So we want people to individually do this activity, and then from there they can, once again, this is also something where they can share with their neighbors their top 5 reasons, real quickly. But we want people to just share out, and this is where we want you to be specific, right? This is where it doesn't help if you just say brotherhood, social events, like is there something very specific? Like, one of the top 5 reasons, our chapter at the time, Hayden and I were not in school at the same time, but one of the things that we had a huge rafting trip every year, and it was called Up the Creek, and it was a whitewater rafting camping trip. that was one of the things we talked about a lot during recruitment, because it was one of the things that people just got hyped up for. It was like a signature event that we looked forward to. Is usually around Memorial Day weekend, but it was something that we talked about a lot because it was just one of the more unique things that no other fraternity on campus was doing this, but it was something that was very specific to DU. And like it was brotherhood building, right? But it often was just a really cool, unique thing. So we want people, you might need to give them specific examples through this. Hey, I don't know if you have, if we're going to give specific examples, sometimes it might be your facility. Sometimes it might be, and I've seen chapters say, our food's amazing at the house, whatever that is. Like some of them can be serious, sometimes can be funny, but if the food is amazing and your cook is great, then list it as a top 5 reason.
Yeah.
Hey, I don't know if you have other examples.
Yeah, I think 3, I mean, more than 3 come to mind. I think 3 in just different realms. One in the like participating in philanthropy, which is a huge part of the fraternal experience, is Anchor Splash. And Dominic actually came and watched us do Anchor Splash. Like it was a big deal for us to dance. It's how we really got our name out when we were a new chapter. And that was just a fun, we knew it was in May. We had a couple sorority women that were friends who were help choreograph our entire dance. I mean, we got together and it was just an exciting time for us and one of the favorite things we did. The second one was our own philanthropy, so the GSI Gridiron, so a flag football tournament, just another fun thing that we were able to do and provide. And fortunately at that time, not that Oregon football has gotten any worse, but Marcus Mariota was there. So having a flag football tournament at Oregon for those 3 years that we were there and doing it when I was there was just a big favorite thing. And then the last thing would be brotherhood centered. We used to be the guys who would hold the big silver Oregon O in the student section. So actually during recruitment, we would center things around football games sometimes, and then guys who are P&Ms could actually come stand in that section with us and kind of have that camaraderie and brotherhood and feel what that felt like. And we knew where guys were. And so if you were showing up separate from the rest of the chapter, you knew to just look for the Oregon O, and that's where you knew other DUs were going to be. So those are just the first 3 things that come to mind that are in different areas. That for me, I would share with a PNM of like, these are really fun things that you could be participating in.
No, absolutely. So once you get people to do this individually, Hayden and I started sharing specific examples, but then we want to articulate that. So it says top 10 reasons. This could be top 6 reasons. This could be top 20 reasons. But we want what I've traditionally done with this activity is, as the VP recruitment, you will have everyone share their number 1 or number 2, like best reason to join your chapter. And I would flip once again. I would invest in a flip chart paper, because there's a bunch of these activities that we've been talking about that if you have a chapter flip chart paper, it's really helpful. It's just, you really just literally write down the specific things. So Hayden mentioned participating in philanthropy events. I mentioned our rafting trip. So literally have everyone go around the room and share out their top 1 or 2, and then go around the room to see if you missed anything. This is then an opportunity for you all to determine, like I said, can you come up with top 10 is a number that people just use, but it could be more than 10. It could be 8 reasons. What are the 10 best reasons to join your chapter? What makes you unique, right? I mean, I think some of our chapters I'll just use an example too. Some of our chapters really lean into the non-secrecy piece. They invite people to initiation. They invite families to initiation. They very much sell it as, yes, we're like every other chapter, but we have a really unique thing when people are afraid about hazing or about like the secret nature of a chapter, that we have as an organization, our chapter really leans into the non-secrecy thing and really does a great job of making our ritual public, right? Some of our chapters do initiation on their front, like the front yard of their chapter house, right? Some chapters will do it, in a public location on campus, and they invite all the fraternity and sorority chapter presidents. They invite their friends, their loved ones, their family members. So it just makes it a really unique thing that other organizations don't have, right? So that's where we talk about specific, unique things. Some of those things, the reasons that you love, are going to be the same that 10 other fraternities are sharing, but that's okay. We just want to make sure that you feel comfortable knowing like why would someone join your chapter? And this gives you an opportunity as a group to talk about, articulate, and get on the same page. Because some chapters I've seen this, they come up with 20 things and they're like, you know what, this list is too big. Some of these things are great, but we can also combine some of these things. So whatever you all want to do, we're not saying you have to come up with 10. We just want you to articulate, why would someone join your chapter? Hayden, any other things on this activity?
No, I think you hit
Okay.
all the important points. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important to know going into recruitment, why would someone join? Like, that's a simple part of it. So perfect. Um, I'm going to let Hayden kind of talk through this, but what are the qualities of D? So we talked about why you joined. We talked about some of the best reasons to join your chapter. Now we want to talk about what are we actually looking for going into recruitment.
Yeah, so here, just another conversation and a flip chart paper. You can have guys pull out, or if they have paper in front of them, you can pair and share. You can break them up into groups of 4, 3. Really, what you want to do here is start talking as a group about what are the qualities of guys that you want within the chapter, right? And so I think what's really important is sometimes we find within chapters there are just different kind of little pockets. I think some you all might call them cliques, right, of like guys, and they all are just kind of different, and so you may feel like that's affecting you a little bit. And it's not that they have different interests, it just simply is like they are just different people, and so they don't really mesh well, right? Like that's just is the reality of what Dominic and I have seen in some chapters, which can clearly have consequences within the recruitment realm. What we've seen in really good chapters is that you have different people who like different things. They have different passions, they have different experiences, but they all have the same similar qualities, right? They're all guys who are excelling academically. They're all guys who want to be involved in the community. They're guys who want to be active on campus. They want to be involved in the chapter in some way, whether that is just being a really, really good general member, which is not a bad thing. Like chapters need that, or they want to be the next president or on the executive team. And so there's these qualities that are similar, but their ideas or their interests and all those are different. So I think that that's an important, and Dominic, feel free to chime in here. That's a different distinction there of like, there are qualities that everyone has. And I go back to my experience where it's like, we had the gamut of like the guys who wouldn't even near go to a football game, and then the guys who went every single week to hold the O. But they also were like really good friends because, or they got along within the chapter because they had the same qualities and they both were really good members of the chapter. So really in this for you, it's really talking about what are those qualities that we want. So identifying, we want, and you don't have, these are just examples of like, we want guys who are going to excel academically. We want guys who want to be involved in the community, within community service. We want guys who have a desire to be involved on committees, in chair positions, on the executive board. We want guys who want to participate in philanthropy, both our own and other folks' philanthropies. We want folks who are involved on campus. So all ideas of those are the type of qualities we want. Of course, we want guys who want to promote friendship and develop character, and diffuse liberal culture and advance justice. But then also, what are those other qualities we want as well? Dominic, anything I missed
Yeah,
there?
no, I think this goes back to like this often goes back to that list of why people join. So if these are the things that are important to us or why you would join, we want people to kind of are to make sure our values match their values, right? And vice versa. We want to make sure this is kind of a symbiotic relationship. So how do we find those people? Some chapters really care about intramurals, so you might want to find guys who you those are questions you ask in recruitment, like, oh, did you play any sports in high school, right? Sometimes that stuff's important, right? So every chapter is going to value. We all have the same fraternity values, but sometimes chapters have individual values or things they really care about. So I think it's important to that's where you all need to be now that you know why people joined, you know why it's what the best thing is about your chapter. Then really let's try to look for some of these things you're really looking for, right? I know our chapter, I know we really valued a good sense of humor. When I was in school, like it was something we had a really goofy, weird sense of humor, but that was quirky guys, and that's something that we really valued. And it was a hodgepodge, as Hayden mentioned, when he was in the same chapter, very hodgepodge, very diverse group of guys. But I think I joined a chapter that really valued the sense of humor, and guys just didn't take themselves very seriously, right? And we got stuff done, but it didn't feel like an uptight, business club, right? So just something to think about is what does that look like, and really just brainstorm as many things that come to mind, and then be able to talk about after you come up with your list of what are we looking for. We want to transition to where do we find this person, right? So Hayden's going to share an example, but some of this, and I'll share a little of some of the things on the screen, but is think about if recruitment is often portraying a day in the life of Delta Epsilon of your chapter, right? Then you have an opportunity to really portray what that looks like. But we need to find out, like, so if you guys probably study every week, guys might work out every week, right? People, I realize I put where do people study twice on this slide. Sorry about that. But also where are people involved, right? I think for me, I was involved in 2 or 3 other things on campus. I also like worked 20 hours a week as well, right? So I used to often like recruit my coworkers. We worked at the library, right? But what does this look like? But some of this is a lot of recruitment is what do you do on campus? So how is your name out there? Hayden mentioned before getting involved in groups philanthropy events, but it's really, really involved in important. This is someone my former professional role, I was in charge of a student involvement office. It's important for members of fraternities and sororities to just get involved and engaged on campus. We don't want to stay in our little bubbles. We don't want to silo ourselves. So what are other student organizations that we can get involved with beyond DU to be able to kind of spread the word out there? But a lot of it is passive marketing too. You're wearing a DU hoodie to class. You're wearing a DU t-shirt to your student government meeting, whatever that looks like, that everything you do on campus is a recruitment opportunity. And I know Hayden has a really specific example of what does this look like when we just talked about what are we looking for? How do we actually go out and find these people?
Yeah. I think there's two. The first one, Dominic, as you were talking, one that came to mind that we talk about a lot, Dominic and I, to groups and just in general in our conversations, it's friends. So specifically like sorority women or just like friends on campus. They're gonna know you and you're gonna need to ask, like, who are your friends that you know or men that you know from high school who are coming here, who are here but aren't affiliated, that you can introduce us to. I remember one specific friend, her brother was coming to school, and we had a good relationship. She had been to a few events of ours, and she gave me his number, and he ultimately joined somewhere else, but we at least had a really good relationship and we'd see each other on campus. But it was a prime example of, like, I just simply asked her, hey, I think I know you have a brother coming to school here. Would he be interested in me reaching out to him? And that was just a really good opportunity there. And clearly she kind of knew the type of guy we were looking for and felt comfortable in that. So that's a good lens. The other one, and we did this right when school started, we knew exactly where all the freshmen ate lunch and dinner. We knew at the residence halls, all the freshmen were going to be there at lunchtime and at dinner time. So as many of the chapter members showed up, we all wore our recruitment t-shirts and we broke up into groups of anywhere between 2 and 4. And the goal was for the next hour or two, go on campus to all the resident hall dining areas, all the athletic fields, anywhere, and just essentially go talk to as many guys as possible. Like, sit at tables, give them your phone numbers. I think we had recruitment cards because we had events coming up and we were just handing out cards, talking to guys, getting numbers, inviting them to an upcoming event. Just so happened that the upcoming event was going to actually be at what used to be called Carson Late Night. So Carson would be a residence hall buffet style, but at night you could go and it was just an a la carte option. And so we took advantage of that, knowing a lot of freshmen are going to be there. If there's food, we can go. If guys want food, great, they can pay for it. If guys don't, they can still show up because you didn't have to swipe or anything to get in. And so we would invite guys to that, and we would just take up 2 whole tables with both current members and PNMs who we invited. And then what started to happen was we had guys within the chapter, like myself and a couple of my recruitment chairs, just go around and see guys kind of look at us, and we'd pull them in or we'd go to them and we talk to them. And so what we found was we both had PNMs who we were inviting, but then at the same time, we had random groups of guys going to Carson late night just to go grab food, which resulted in us talking to them and bringing them in and then inviting them to our next event. So there was this, like, it was just a way for us to think, okay, how can we go to them instead of them coming to us? And we knew that the residence halls were a great place to do that.
No, it's important. So I think just last thing, often in the beginning of semester, there's student involvement fairs. There are just welcome back, especially maybe going into a spring semester or winter quarter. If you're on the quarter system, there's possible that there might be transfer students coming to campus. They're going to be looking to get involved on things. So just get your name out there, get out there as much as possible and do things. Even if you have a chapter facility, do things on campus. it's quite important. So I would look at your student involvement, student activities webpage on your campus and go from there. So for this particular activity, you want people to brainstorm, where can we find these people? So if this is what we care about, and this is the kind of guy we're looking for, where are we going to find these people? So if you care about people who, you want your intramurals team to do better, then potentially let's make sure that we're hanging out at the rec center, we're playing pickup basketball with guys. All of those things are going to be important. But this is where you can translate what you're looking for into actually, you might not be able to find everyone. Are you gonna go up to random people studying the library being like, hey, join Delta Upsilon? Probably, maybe not exactly, but you can at least study. It's possible you're going to meet people who are studying, and especially when you meet people in your class, right? Often people get awkward and don't want to talk to people in their class and introduce people in their class who become their friends to their fraternity. But it's often, a lot of fraternity is friend raising. A lot of what you do is you introduce them, become friends with these guys, and then you invite them to something your fraternity is doing. And oh, by the way, then you end up recruiting someone who's actually in your journalism class, right? So just think about that way. We'll be talking more about that in future recruitment trainings, but we just wanted you to think about this. So brainstorm a list of where do we find these people, and this will be a good, productive conversation for you all.
And I think real quick before we move on, Dominic, in this, as you're facilitating this session, if it gets like, also encourage guys to be like, where do we find him? And then if they start thinking of guys, make sure they're writing those names down so they don't forget. So I think I found that like when I'm facilitating this, they'll be like, oh yeah, like I actually do have a friend who would be interested in this. So it's like, they should be jotting those down or having a system where it's like, hey, here's this QR code or here's this link, like just fill it in and this will go to a form that you've created as a VP of recruitment. And then you've got their info and their numbers. So it's like, hopefully in doing this, it's going to spur some names from guys who they may not have thought of. And so making sure you're saying, hey, as you think of guys, write their name down. So at the end of this, we can make sure add those to our names list. So just another piece there.
No, absolutely. Yeah, that's a big part of it. Yeah. If we actually know people, start that. You should always have a names list that's running 365. So not just for recruitment purposes. Okay. Perfect. All right. We want to talk about conversations and questions. I think this is something where chapters, I think, sometimes struggle with, or they don't know what to talk about in recruitment, right? So often, Hayden and I have both been to recruitment events where people are like, oh, where are you from? Where do you go to high school? What do you do? What sports did you play? Or what did you do in high school? And then that's it. And then it's like crickets, right? You just like, I don't know what to talk about, right? So one of the things that Hayden and I've talked about this before, people like talking about themselves, right? So a big part of recruitment is asking open-ended questions to make sure people like talking about themselves, but you're going to have some really unique stories or things you learn about people because you're asking very specific follow-up questions as well. So Hayden and I will both share some examples, but I think it's important for you all to really help practice. And this is something that my chapter used to do pretty consistently. Like our VP recruitment would often do this during his reports at chapter meeting. Once we were done with our formal using air quotes recruitment process at the beginning of the quarter, his reports would often be sometimes like we would all take 5 minutes to role play. And what do we talk about to get people just comfortable? And specifically, I'm just going to say this: if you have a group of associate members who just got initiated and they've never been on the other side of recruitment, meaning they were recruited in the fall, but have never actually been recruiters, this is a great opportunity for you to practice recruitment skills and conversations about what do you talk about in recruitment and how do you ask the right questions to pull the right information out of them so you can connect them with all the people in the chapter that share similar interests to them. Hayden?
Yeah, so as Dominic said, right, like we've been at recruitment events, we've seen it where and I am sure you as the VP of recruitment, and if you were to ask your members, they would tell you, yeah, we all get asked the same thing as we went through recruitment, where I'm from, what's my major, all of those things, right? Like that, we all know. I think that you can get that information, but then it's how you follow up to that information. So if I'm asking Dominic, right, it's like first time I'm meeting Dominic, it's like, hey, Dominic, where are you from? Dominic saying Santa Monica. Okay, that's awesome. Like, how'd you like growing up in Santa Monica, right? Like what brought you to the University of Oregon? Like that's a pretty far trek. Hey, Dominic, what's your major? Dominic's going to tell me journalism. Okay, great. Like, what made you choose journalism? Like that's super interesting, right? And really being active in those follow-up questions, getting him to talk to me, right? Like, hey, are you involved in any clubs on campus? If it's, oh, great, talk to me. I haven't heard about that club. And it's really just having that conversational piece. I always ask guys, one of my favorite questions is always, what are you looking for in just a student group? Like not even a fraternity. Like I don't even use it's like just a student group, because clearly like Dominic would want to get involved if he's showing up to an event or I'm talking to him. It's like, what are you looking for? And so now I'm getting more information about like the certain things Dominic is talking about, and then I can follow up with him on some of those things that he says. And so it's really just about not saying like, hey Dominic, are you interested in joining a fraternity? Like, well, yeah, if he wasn't, he probably wouldn't be at my event, right? But it's more about like, what interests you? Like, what are some things that are going to stand out to you, or what do you think's going to get you to where you want to be in 4 years when you graduate from the U of O, right? Or if there was a recent football game, hey man, did you go to the football game? Like, what'd you think? Like, I couldn't believe that Bo Nix threw that interception. Dominic, I can't believe that Bo Nix threw that interception. So, right, like it's those little things that you're just having that conversation with, and allowing for guys to talk. And what I have found, and Dominic, I don't know if you've seen this too, is like the more questions you ask, there's gonna be a point most of the time that you see a guy's face light up because they're talking about something that they like, and that's the moment that you've turned the corner of like, okay, this guy, I know what this guy needs, or I know how to like follow up on that, right? Like he may be a little
Yep.
shy at first, but then I start talking about, we're just going to keep using Star Wars. I bring up Star Wars, or Dominic talks about, oh, I was really interested. Oh, the reason I chose journalism is because I saw these Star Wars movies and there's this connection. And now he starts talking about it a lot, and boom, I've got him. Right. And I don't get there if I'm not asking these questions that allow for Dominic to talk.
Yep.
And I think the last thing I'll say in my recruitment style, when I'm talking to a PNM, in the first 15 to 20 minutes, I'm not talking a lot. I'm simply asking a lot of questions. I'm actively listening, which is super key. Dominic, I were just talking about this. Like I can ask a ton of questions and not listen, and that's not successful. I can ask a ton of questions and actively listen and respond, and it changes the entire relationship and entire recruitment process for Dominic. So I think some things to keep in mind. I think the last piece would be think about, if these guys are going through a formal process, how many conversations they're having with different fraternities, and you want to be the one that stands out to them. And the way to stand out is really asking these questions that are open-ended about the person and actively responding and remembering things about them that mean something, rather than they're going to go to DU, then they're going to go to next fraternity and get the same questions. And the only difference is, well, I went to X fraternity last, so I like them the best because nothing stood out other than they're the most recent group I just talked to.
No, absolutely. I absolutely echo everything Hayden's saying. This could be when you're doing the seminar, this recruitment training, you can have people stand up and pair up and just practice questions. I think practice. This is what our women's groups do. They usually spend a week plus, but they often consistently practice conversation skills. Because a lot of it is you want people to feel comfortable, but if you're actively listening, you're also going to make those connections with other guys in the fraternity and connect them with other people. Because ultimately, a lot of people you asked earlier in this webinar when we talked about why did you join? Often it's going to be is because someone remembered my name. Someone remembered remembered all of the things that I cared about. And these are chapters too. I think a lot of our really successful chapters, as Hayden mentioned, like you find out all these great things about these guys that you can put all of those notes in your names list. However, you're documenting notes on each PNM is be able to put all this information in there. So some people just remember like, oh yeah, you have two sisters that go to Oregon. You played baseball. You also were the lead in the school musical. You can remember some things, but the things that when you find out the person's really passionate about something, good chapters who recruit or good recruiters will remember specific details or remembers people's names, right? All of these things are important, but if you're actively listening, this is where you just need people, you need to continue to practice this stuff. This could be an activity that you spend a half an hour on, is really just throwing out different types of questions and getting the guys who've never been, especially the guys who've never been on the other side of recruitment before, let them be the recruiter and let the older guys in the chapter, associate chapter, be the P&M, and just practice, 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 practice. It's important, right? This is often like I mentioned a couple minutes ago, this is often what our chapter did at literally during chapter meeting. We would stop for 5 minutes and role play, right? I walked into a chapter, that's just what we did. But I just thought that was something that we did. Apparently, a lot of chapters don't do that, but it was super helpful to just get us to practice, especially for the new guys who've never gone through recruitment before on the other side. So it's important. Have conversation skills, and this is something. If you need more assistance with this, we can specifically hand you specific questions or topics. But I think it's really important that people practice active listening and making sure that open-ended questions are, you'll get more than a 1 or 2 word answer. Does that make sense? Right? Open-ended is you're really asking them the why, the what, all of those things to really get them talking more about themselves. And I think, as Hayden said, it's like you're going to be just asking a lot of questions. Like 80% of that conversation, you might just be asking questions. And so they're doing 80% of the talking, and then you're just, and your 20% is really just questions, right? And answering, they might ask you specific questions about the chapter, but really it's you asking really good questions and introducing them to other people in the chapter. So perfect. All right. The flip side is, what should we not be talking about in recruitment, right? So what we talk about is sometimes chapters will have this conversation, especially for guys who've never been through in recruitment on the other side, is what should we stay away from? What are actual red flags for P&Ms? Why would someone not get a bid? But we want to talk about, like, people could have their own beliefs about social issues. I'll just frame it as that however you guys want to have the conversation, but it's good to have the conversation. We just talked about what the best things are in the chapter. If someone, I'll just say a normal red flag. Someone walks in and immediately starts talking about all they care about is they just want to get drunk, they want to get blacked out, they want to get high, and then they're like, "What do you guys do?" They might just want to talk about their recreational drug use in the recruitment process. I've seen that happen before. It happened to me before as a recruiter, and I was like, I don't know what to talk to this guy about. But I had this conversation with them. But these are things that I think as a chapter, you need to talk about what do we not talk about? How do we steer people away from these conversations? If that's something, we'll talk about that in a second. But also, it's good to articulate what are things that if we talk about the list of what we're looking for, if someone, it's almost like this is coming up with the opposite list, which you don't necessarily have to do, but you also should be on the same page with. If something concerning pops up in the middle of recruitment, how do you address that, and who's the right person in the chapter to address that? Hayden, you want to follow up that?
Yeah, I think that's like, how do you address it? How do you follow up? What are the things you should be looking for? I think, to Dominic's point, if somebody's coming in and their questions are all about partying and drug use and, well, how many social events do you have? And they're really not talking about anything else, right? Like, one, that's an indication that they're really just worried about that, right? Like, I have recruited guys who have said, yeah, I want to have a social life within a fraternity. We're a social fraternity, so of course they do, right? That is not in and of itself a red flag. Now, I've had other guys who have, that's all they've talked about. And when I've tried to talk to them about leadership opportunities or philanthropy or anything like that, clearly they're just like, okay, cool. Like, talk to me about when your next social event is. No, you're probably not the right fit. I think here too, like, the first thing you shouldn't necessarily be talking about is all the social events you're going to have, right? Like, and you can talk about, we are a very social fraternity in addition to all these other things. But if all you're talking about during recruitment is that, then that's an issue as well, right? Like, the organization is more than just about these parties and drinking and all of that, right? Like, there are all these different areas there. So I think you just have to be aware of it. I think, as the VP of recruitment, it's important to really have this conversation with guys to understand, like, hey, as you're hearing these things, bring them up to me. Now, if it's something very serious, that needs to be addressed right away. And typically that's going to be addressed to you as the VP of recruitment, and most likely the president, and maybe potentially an advisor. And I've seen groups do this really well, where there might be in a conversation with a P&M, and then that VP of recruitment needs to have that follow-up conversation with them. And so I think to Dominic's point, it's what's being talked about, what are you hearing, what are guys actually saying, who needs to follow up, why do they need to follow up, what conversations need to be had, that all lead to kind of these pieces of what not to talk about in recruitment.
Yeah, I'm just gonna use the caveat too. Just be respectful in this process. I think if there are some red flags, sometimes your red flags might be a pink flag or a green flag for another chapter. Hayden knows I was on IFC for 2 years when I was in the chapter. I was very interfraternal and often had the conversation of steering them towards knowing and being upfront with them in the recruitment process. We're not going to be able to give you a bid, but we do think you actually might be a really good fit for XYZ chapter. I know it wasn't because I was trying to pass off our problem to someone else. I just knew that based on what this freshman was looking for is something specifically that I knew that they'd be a good fraternity member. I just knew they wouldn't be a good fit for us, right? So this is the conversation about the fit piece that often sometimes people they're that what they're valuing now as a freshman does not add up to what we value as an organization. And Hayden mentioned it too. Often we want to be like a one-stop shop that you can get all of your academic, brotherhood, service, philanthropy, leadership, athletic, social opportunities all in one organization, but it cannot be where we're a social athletic drinking club first and then everything else kind of comes together from there, right? So we want to just make sure that you are at least have a conversation, it's kind of the serious conversation as a chapter to talk about how do we handle situations like this? What are we not necessarily what are we not looking, what do we not talk about? Because sometimes people might have very specific opinions. I'll just say this about politics, about recreational, about social issues, anything like that is we're telling you all talk about amongst yourselves is what do you talk about in recruitment? We're not telling you to stay away from specific topics, but I ultimately, if all you talk, if someone in your chapter is ultimately just talking about something that's illegal or ridiculous or inappropriate, like those are things we want to make sure that you don't have this person on a different island at every PNM he's talking to. He talks to them about something that scares off the PNM, or the PNM is like, everyone's talking to me about this, and this one individual is completely on a different page and is looking for something completely different. So we don't talk about anything any more longer than this, but I just wanted we at least wanted you to be on the same page about this moving forward.
I think real quick, Dominic, I will make one more point, and it's about specifically freshmen. What I have seen is that sometimes freshmen they bring up topics because they think that that's what they should be talking about to you as the VP of recruitment or somebody within the chapter. And sometimes all it takes is redirection for them to actually really understand what they're wanting out of it. And so I think as specifically, I'm talking to the VPs of recruitment, but I think as you're communicating this to the chapter, if somebody comes up and says, oh, this one guy was talking about X, you encouraging them to say, okay, well, did we redirect them? Were there follow-up conversations? Did we talk to them about other things within the chapter? How did they respond? So I've seen that. I used to see that a lot with freshmen where it was like, I think I should be talking to you about like partying, but in reality, they really just thought that that's what was going to get them through the door. And some redirection of like, that's great, but we also offer these things, and them realizing, oh, I can talk about these other things as well, is just really helpful. So
especially, depending on where they grew up, where their friends from college also went to school, their older siblings who might explain to them their definition of fraternity versus they had no idea that a fraternity can actually be a lot more than A, B, and C, right? Perfect. All right, let's talk through this. This is an opportunity too. So we also want you to be able to feel comfortable talking through difficult situations. This is also need to be a role-playing activity where you allow people to maybe someone's a PNM and then someone's a recruiter, and then just go through each of these questions, right? So these are just some examples of why someone might not join your chapter, might not be join a fraternity. Sometimes it's an excuse. Sometimes it's a legitimate fear or legitimate concern why they wouldn't want to join your chapter, or might just want to might not want to join the chapter at all. I know for myself, on the bottom left column, it talks about my parents don't want me to join. My mom loved shows like 60 Minutes and Dateline and 2020 and things like that, and she was afraid that I was going to get hazed. So therefore, my mom said, you need to wait a quarter. and then you can do whatever you want, right? So that was something that was hard because I had to tell some chapters, I'm like, look, I'm interested in you, but I legit can't join. And I was okay waiting. I wasn't necessarily rushing into it, quote unquote, but I do want to make sure though that you all feel comfortable um, being able to articulate this, right? So Hayden and I can walk through. Hayden, I'll just start each one, and we can just kind of chime in back and forth. So obviously, I can't afford it. Chapters, you can talk about payment plans. You can talk about what they're getting out of the dues process, right? So often, your chapter should be able to articulate what all the due. If they're paying $600 a semester, what does that $600 go towards? And realizing that often a lot of those things and the activities that $600 covers is things that they probably have to pay $1,000 for if they're in 6 different organizations, right? So that's a way to combat that. But there are ways to talk through this. If someone legit cannot afford it, I know for me, I work 20 hours a week. I had a part-time job on campus. Like I paid for the fraternity because I was able to pay for the fraternity through my part-time job, right? That was something that, that my family helped support, like room and board at the chapter house, but I needed to, so that's just an example from my end. I don't have enough time. I think time management is a big thing. I think some chapters, or the fear factor is that you're sucking up all of their time, and that it's going to feel like it's a 5 credit class if they're a new associate member. That is not the case. Definitely look at a balanced schedule, making sure that you're not over programming the brand new people who join, or even the juniors and seniors, right? You want to make sure that your chapter has a good chapter calendar, and it doesn't feel like there is a mandate that there's 6 mandatory things a week, but making sure though that I think you as a chapter should be articulate how much time commitment would it be if you join as an associate member? Is it 5 hours a week? Is it 10 hours a week? What does that look like to be an associate member? I think being able to articulate, I don't want to just party. I want to just party. I think this is where we just talked about this is how do you articulate and strike a balance of what everything you all do? You do brother events, you do philanthropy events, everything like that. They're like, yes, socialization is part of what we do, but that's not the only thing we do. I already talked about parents. Hayden, do you want to cover the other side?
Yeah. I don't drink or do drugs. Obviously, clearly we've heard that one. I think and to the other ones as well, and to all of these, what I would always sometimes do is ask to understand like their perception, like why might you think that you don't have enough time? And so it helps me like meet them where they're at, because in this case, like I don't drink or do drugs. They may have felt like there was a couple conversations that made them feel that way, but in reality, talking about, well, yeah, that's not what we do, right? Like there's a ton of guys that don't drink or do drugs, and we do all these other things besides partying and drinking. So I think just again, like helping frame that of like the fraternity is not that and it's more than that, and then providing specific examples to what that looks like. And I think to a lot of these that I'll mention before I forget it is think about, are there guys in the chapter where these were also concerns for them that are now in the chapter, and how can I then connect them, right? So if I'm recruiting somebody who's saying my parents, hey Dominic, do you mind talking to this guy because like his parents are not about it, and like maybe that just provides a different perspective. I literally have seen chapters I've talked to parents when I was chapter president of like, I've had moms call me and next thing you know, it's like I reassured them. I've worked with chapters who have had parents call parents and are like, I was a parent who wasn't too sure about this, and this is how I work through it, and they actually are true to it. So I think being creative can also be really helpful. And I know Dominic and I and IHQ and even your advisors can be sometimes helpful in just like framing what those conversations might look like. I'm worried about my grades. Obviously, I would always tell guys like, well, you're here at school first, and if you can't get good grades, you can't be part of the chapter. So I need you to actually get good grades, and you should have a threshold or a requirement. So really, again, helping them understand the importance of academics within that. And I think sometimes this, like, I'm worried about my grades goes back to I won't have enough time for my schooling. So helping them understand like the time management piece and how that's built in, and what are you doing academically to help support guys. I don't want to be hazed. You shouldn't be getting hazed. So that really should help them, right? Like non-hazing fraternity, sometimes good opportunity to connect them with a very recent, newly initiated member to say like, hey, can you talk them through the associate member education process, right? What did that look like for you? because they just went through that, and again, help them understand. And again, that's probably fear because they're seeing or hearing that other places. And so that's a fear for them. Totally understandable there. And I only want to join a large chapter. I think this one, you really have to have the conversation of like why that is. Like, what do you feel like you're missing? Like, really understanding where they're coming from when they're having those conversations. And again, laying out the benefits. In some cases, laying out kind of like where they can fit into the chapter, laying out like what's the vision of the chapter, like you joining gets us to that next level to become that. And so I think that one, it can be really not tricky, but just more of, hey, Dominic, talk to me a little bit more about why that might be the case. And let's address some of these concerns or not concerns or reasons that you want to join a larger chapter compared to our chapter, so we can have that conversation. I think ultimately, and Dominic, feel free to chime in here, like all of these are it's all about the conversation and how you're responding to the guy, right? Like if Dominic's bringing up any of these concerns, they are all valid concerns that I need to put time and effort into addressing. And in some cases, there's only so much you can do, right? Like I can't necessarily get rid of dues altogether, but I can talk to you about all your options. And if all I say is like, great, can't afford it, Dominic, like, see you later, that doesn't really help. But if I'm having the conversation with Dominic, that's going to be a lot more productive in these situations and the best way to respond to that.
Yeah. Yeah, I just echo, I agree with everything Hayden said. I think it's important that you practice these, that you go probably through each one of these and then let people practice and then share out what the answers are with each other, then go on to the next one, right? So you can go through and allow people to actually practice. I say this one, right? Just a follow from Hayden said. So I think I can't afford it thing. What you don't want is a sophomore or someone who just went through recruitment and someone says, I can't afford it. And then the person says, oh, you know what? We'll work something out with you. And then he joins, and then there's nothing that can work out because ultimately we're a fraternity and a business. And then the person's like, wait, you told me you'd work with me, but working with their definition of working with them is very different from what you guys thought working with chapters. Everyone should know how much going. We always talk about this in recruitment. Everyone should always know going into recruitment how much dues are. What do dues go towards? Right? You need to know this stuff. So practice, practice, practice. You might also ask your chapter, what are other things you're hearing that aren't on this list, right? We'd even like to hear them too. But what are other reasons why people might say no or say they can't join right now? Sometimes we know often when people say I don't have time or I can't do this right, I can't afford it, that might be the truth, but some of it is also something else as well. So just these are things you just want to dig into a little bit and really this is a really good conversation to have with your chapter as well. So,
and before we move on, I think important as you're facilitating this to ask, hey, how many of you guys, like, I can't afford it? Like, how many of you guys had that concern before you joined, right? And jotting that down to just keep in the back of your mind, like, there's a potential to like follow up in case I get this question later on. So,
and especially
that members, yeah.
Well, especially if chapters are like some chapters are all inclusive, so their dues are really expensive, and other chapters do more a la carte, where their dues are cheaper, then you have to pay for more things out of pocket. So just know that stuff, what your dues go towards, and people can articulate it. But often people think like our dues are going to be like $5,000 a semester or something. You're like, nope, it's $400 a semester, and they're like, oh, that I can afford that, but they just don't know. But often people are awkward and don't want to ask that stuff, right? So you need to be upfront about this to be able to let them know in the recruitment process how much it is to join before they accept a bid, right? Be upfront about that. That's not something we need to hide. Because I think often chapters are afraid about that because they just want people to get through the door and never have the conversation to be able to say, hey, just want to let you know, this is how much we can put you on a payment plan, but go from there. So just have these conversations with your chapter and we'll go from there. All right. So we're going to, for our last couple slides here, basically making a lasting impact. Oh, what just happened? Okay. So real quick is what we want to do is some of the slides. Okay, I'm sorry. So it's important here is we talked about why you joined. The slide is not popping up though, but we wanted to talk about why are you still here, right? So we talked about before. So we talked about all these great things about the chapter in this recruitment seminar, and the same kind of setup. Have everyone be in the same circle, but it's a good activity to start. One at the beginning is why did you join? The activity you do at the end is why are you still here? So what does the fraternity mean to you? what kind of impact has the fraternity had on you, and really have people articulate. Everyone go around and share this, but trust me, trust me, trust me. This is a very different answer, especially coming from the older guys in the chapter, of what the fraternity has done for them. And this often 18 to 22-year-olds don't have an opportunity to reflect on this, but like lifelong friendships and all the things that have popped up for you, all the things that have popped up that are really impactful and powerful for you. So just making sure that the same setup as why did you join, but do the same thing as to why are you still here? What does fraternity mean to you? What kind of impact fraternity has? Really important, impactful conversation. We also wanted to make sure from here also is we need to in this process is be able to talk about what is recruitment. What if you have a formal process, a semi-formal process, whatever you call it, a recruitment process is what does recruitment look like for both formal and informal. We want you the opportunity to share your schedule of events, go through day by day by day. Where do you need people? Who do you need to be certain places? Who's on your recruitment team, and what people are doing when and whatnot, right? We need as many people as possible to be at events, even if this is where you can talk about roles. You might have a specific recruitment team. There's the 10 of you that are going to be more of the frontline people that meet everyone right when they first come in the door. And then those people will introduce the P&Ms to all the other guys in the chapter, right? Some chapters will have some guys really feel more comfortable being the video game guy, the guys flipping burgers, whatever that looks like for you. We want to make sure that you're talking about roles and responsibilities. We also want to make sure that everyone's on the same page with what the membership selection process and bidding process looks like. So who makes the decisions about bidding? How do you make those decisions? We want to just make sure, especially if people have not been on the other side before, what does this process look like? We definitely recommend not having an arduous 10-hour process every night to determine who's getting a bid. If you like the person and the person's going to be a good fit, you don't need overly restrictive bidding bylaws and whatnot. We'll talk more about that in a future training, but just something to think about. We want to make sure that you ask, what questions do you have? Because people are going to feel awkward. We all know recruitment is the art of awkward man flirting. People sometimes don't want to ask the awkward question, but making sure that they have questions. We want to allow for feedback. Be like, hey, have you thought about this? We did this last year. Because you might have a former recruitment chair in the room who might be like, hey, John, did you do this? And John you might be the new VP recruitment. You might be brand new to this. You might have just got initiated a month ago, and now you're VP recruitment for your chapter. So you're going to need as much assistance from possible. So ask for feedback, ask for questions, just making sure all that stuff. And Hayden's going to talk about continued relationships, was beyond maybe the 1 week formal recruitment process. You're going to have to do a lot of continued relationship building from there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the last one, I think it's just having the conversation that the relationship that you are building with potential new members during the recruitment process doesn't end necessarily when the formal recruitment process ends. That relationship needs to continue. And that's for a lot of reasons, right? That's clearly for just values wise, the promotion of friendship, for good fraternity and sorority life community, but also for the potential, and this happens more often than most people think, that a guy joins somewhere else, has a very bad experience at that other organization, and then drops during the new member process and is looking for fraternity experience, but doesn't know where to take it. Not necessarily where to take it, but doesn't know where to go. So what they either do is they are smart enough to go through the process again and just kind of say, I'm going to find somewhere else, or they don't join a fraternity whatsoever. And so a prime example is Dominic and I were both recruiting during an expansion. We had this really great P&M, really great individual who we were like, we want him to be a part of DU. It was during an expansion process, so we were newer, and so there was some hesitation on his part. And so he joined somewhere else, and that was totally fine. We continued to just kind of keep in touch with him. We'd see him around campus and say hi, right? We had his number, all of those pieces. About 3 months later, get a text from him saying, hey, I'm no longer part of that organization. He had a horrible experience. Can we have a meeting to talk about DU? We had that meeting. He was really interested. We gave him a bid. He accepted his bid. He ended up becoming chapter president. Those are those things where if Dominic and I would have said, nope, sorry, man, you joined another organization, good luck, I'm never going to say hi to you again, it would have led to him either staying in the position he was in, which wouldn't have been good, leaving the position, joining another organization, or leaving his organization and then just finding other ways on campus to be involved. So it's really important to, in your next steps and logistics, really talk about how are we going to keep these relationships going beyond just our recruitment period.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about that in a future webinar, but post the first month of school, like what does recruitment continue to look like for y'all, and how do you continue to build that names list, right? Because anytime you meet an unaffiliated man on campus, that he's a potential new member, right? He might not join in the spring, but he might be a great person to join in the fall, right? So just continue to friend raise and go from there. So lastly, we want to just talk about how will you commit to the chapter. So final wrap up, a way to kind of tie a bow on everything is how are you going to commit to the chapter? And every person will go around and share what role you played in recruitment. How are you going to contribute? We've heard many, many times from chapters, especially in spring semester, winter quarter, if you're in the quarter system, is that sometimes if that's not your primary recruitment period, often people just don't take it as seriously or don't want to be as involved. So we want to make sure that people can articulate whatever that role looks like. They might be a frontline recruitment person and being on your recruitment committee, or they might be you might tap them at different times, right? I know our chapter was very committed to engaging seniors in the recruitment process. And the way we did that often was through informal. So we'd meet someone at a formal recruitment event, and then we would take guys to coffee or lunch kind of in between formal events. And that's where our chapter would tap seniors who are like, look, this guy, Hayden, you're a senior. This guy played basketball. He's also from Southern California. He is literally mini Hayden. Hayden, I need you to come to lunch with me and this P&M to walk through something. And that's how we kept our seniors engaged. They would often come to events, they would meet guys, but they weren't the frontline people. They're like, I'm too old, which is funny because when I was a senior, I didn't turn 21 until November of my senior year. So I was like, I could say I was old, but I really wasn't that old, right? But often seniors act like they're senior citizens. So we want to make sure that we're still engaging them in the recruitment process. But sometimes you give them a specific role in recruitment. It's hard for people to say no if you go up to someone at a meeting and be like, hey, Hayden, I need you to come to this. Or send them a text, because often, or you call them up. Sometimes people are afraid to call. Pick up the phone, call the person, and be like, John, I need you to come to lunch with me. It's going to be a free lunch. The fraternity's paying for it, but this guy, you're going to be the reason why this guy joins, because John, you're on student government. This freshman wants to be involved in student government. I think you're going to be the one that connected that he can still do student government and DU at the same time and still excel in school, right? So I think that's just an example, but we did that all the time, and it was a great way but that's a great way for a senior, like I'm using the name John, where John can say, I will contribute any way you need me. Just let me know I can contribute. I will be present at events, but I will also be available to help with closing the deal and being able to have those deeper conversations about what the fraternity's done for me, right? Any examples, Hayden, as we wrap up?
No examples. I think the big thing would be, and I always tell guys this, is when you are communicating roles, it is important to explain why you are putting that role responsibility on that person. So like what Dominic said, you're not just going to tell John to show up because I need you there. That's not necessarily going to John's just going to be like, okay, cool. Like, good luck, right? We've seen that. That was a lot of work I've done with chapters of I can't get that. But the moment that Dominic says, here's the reason why I need you there, it gets on a couple levels. One, it's very clear, right? It's clear why John needs to be there. So John knows what he needs to do. And two, it's somewhat kind of strokes okay, yeah, John has still something to give back to the fraternity, and it has these things. So in anything it is, whether it's I just need you there to be a warm body to talk to guys in case I meet somebody who I can connect you with, and to I need you to be at these Friday lunches that we have every week with P&Ms because you are the guy that connects, because some guys just don't see that, right? Some guys need to be told you can be the reason why we recruit this group of guys because they're so connected to you. They need to be told that why that's important to the fraternity instead of just I need you there. Probably preaching to the choir here is the VPs of recruitment and as undergraduate men. Guys don't necessarily just being told what to do. They like to have an understanding of why they're showing up and why that's important. So yeah. I think as you're facilitating this, having that conversation of why those roles are important to the chapter.
No, absolutely. And just make people articulate. This is almost a way to commit them to actually showing up. We have heard the engagement piece, but we really need this gives you almost like a way to lock them in and be like, look, you said you're going to help. I think a lot of your job as VP recruitment is some of that people management piece of making sure that specific people are there that you need them to be there. And I know it's an extra step, but this is where I think if you assign specific roles for logistics and event planning and things to other people on your committee, social media work, like someone to design t-shirts, all that stuff can be assigned to some other people. You can really quarterback the whole process and really manage the people, get the right people to the right events, making sure that people are in the right roles. We're going to talk more about that in the spring Amplify sessions, but making sure that that's really important for you. So what we're doing is this is our session. There probably are more things you could potentially do. I do recommend you could do this program and split it up into different chapter meetings. You could do it all together as one standalone meeting. As I said before, I will send out the slides to people who request them, and then you can use them as you want. You can switch the order of the things, but we do think that it's important though that the order that we talked about today is it's a natural kind of building block that actually helps get people to the end. By the end, they're going to be, hopefully there's going to be lit a fire under their asses and they're excited to help with recruitment. They're willing to commit and they're actually going to show up to things, right? Because even I don't buy the excuse of I'm a senior, I'm only going to be around for a semester or two. Like that's ridiculous, because I will say this, those guys are going to come back for potentially for football games, for alumni events. Like I'll be honest, I was highly engaged senior, and I was one of those seniors who could come back a year after I graduated, 2 years, 3 years, and still knew people in the chapter because I was actively engaged senior. So this is sometimes you need to remind people that this is a lifetime commitment. And sometimes, as I know for me and Hayden, the same, Hayden joined a new chapter, so he didn't have those seniors, but it was the seniors to me, the juniors and seniors, upperclassmen were people that I looked up to, and those are people, the reasons why I joined the chapter. I really liked the sophomore class, the class above me, but the juniors and the seniors, which really sold me as to what I was going to get out of this fraternity experience, and that was really powerful for me. So thank you again. If you have any questions, please reach out to Hayden and I. We will share our contact information in the distribution of this video. Best of luck, and let us know how we can help you have a successful recruitment moving forward. Stop recording. Oh, wait.